Greetings, everyone. This is the Hipster Snek, joined today by my good buddy, Ditaku.
So there I was at the video game store, and the people at the video game store were like, "Here's a game. It's a game that we found in a little brown paper bag at midnight." And we go, "Oh, this just says video game on an NES cartridge. That's not unusual. Do you want to buy it?" And I go, "Sure." And I put it in my game, and then my game starts leaking blood. Is this normal?
Please help. It is difficult to clean the carpet.
It was hyper-realistic blood.
Because of course it was. Yeah, originally an idea that I had for a Halloween episode this year, which obviously didn't happen because we're very good at timekeeping here. Season 2 coming soon, promise.
November is the spookiest time of year
Oh yeah,
because
definitely.
dealing with Thanksgiving. See, we are true pioneers. Everyone's like, Halloween is the spookiest time of year. No, Thanksgiving is the real spookiest time of year because then you have to see your weird uncles, which is where I am now in the family tree. So, surprise!
It's also when they release Mariah Carey from her prison of frost, so...
You know what? I don't care what anyone says. Um, th- uh, Christmas doesn't start until December. I don't
Agreed.
care what anyone else says.
I agree.
Thank November is Turkey month.
Yeah.
December is Christmas time.
Yeah. Nope,
Don't
I agree.
try to extend it like some kind of, giant encephalopathic cephalopod that's going to just like consume the entire year retail America.
Yeah,
Stop it.
there's a lot of that. But yeah, no, for a Halloween episode, I considered briefly, I could do like a top 10 or like the top 5 and top 5 best and top 5 worst video game creepypastas. And then I realized that most of them are hot garbage. Like the overwhelming majority of them suck, and the few that are good are either super short or they suck because they run too long. Looking at you, haunted Majora's Mask.
Are you talking about Bend Round or are you talking about something
No,
else?
that's the Ben Drowned story. Because the story started off really, really good. And it was just like a post on X on a certain underwater basket weaving forum. And it was actually like it's really good. It was very eerie. It had the right mood, and then he tried the second arc, and it completely fell apart. And years later, he attempted a third arc that was just random, and it didn't make any sense, and it became a shonen battle anime. And I was like, "This is bad. You should have just left it with the first arc and been done with it."
Oh, come on. I mean, I know it's a meme at this point, but I mean, turning something from horror to shonen battle is precisely the way Yu Yu Hakusho worked, and that's awesome.
No, it can work. I would argue it can work. In this case, it really didn't. They tried to do this weird thing about transhumanism, and like it really fell apart, and it felt like a lot of the first arc got retconned. And I'm like, that was the best part of your story. You really did yourself a disservice by doing it this way. So that one would have been like on the straddling line of good and bad because again, the first arc was fantastic. I think it was a standard bearer for a long, long time. But then you have stuff like Sonic.exe, which is literally one of the worst things ever written. Like, I
I
do not understand the inexplicable popularity among 7-year-olds for such a bad creepypasta.
I legit really want to see you actually like sit down and try and do an ERG or creepypasta and see like what you would do and have it be like, oh no, it was the haunted Monster Rancher one disc. And every single time I try to talk to Holly, she's like, have you ever thought about the fact that if you look at a clock, it's like your life slowly burning out? You are a candle. You are merely burning away. Your entire existence is ephemeral. I don't know any of those words.
This is a little beyond me, but yeah, okay. Now, the real horror story is the ghost unlock prerequisite, so there is something to be said for that. If I was going to do a gaming creepypasta, I would have to give that some thought. I have some ideas for. I had an idea for an analog horror series, but I'll put a pin in that idea, and we'll revisit that at a later date. Now, we appear to have a surprise guest.
Yes. So, Noodle, you've torn yourself away from the Eternal Demon Queen, but it seems like she has kept her claws in you.
Well, yes. Yes, I have. I've torn my way.
Is she in the room with us right now?
She's not in the room with us right now.
She's always in the room with us right now. She transcends space and time.
Okay, it was going to be a case of like, oh no, is this going to be the day we're going to actually have to explain to her? How you doing, buddy? How you doing?
I am doing all right. I am doing all right.
That's good. That's good, because we're getting to our thesis statement for today's episode, which is we are going to talk about the haunted Godzilla NES creepypasta story and its sequel replayed.
Are you familiar with this at all, Noodle?
I am familiar with the original. I did not know that it had a sequel.
It has a sequel, and the sequel has always kind of been in a strange state, because I remember at one point the author Cosby Daff listed that it was canceled, but then he listed it as like uncanceled, and it just updated sometime last year. And I gotta say, if you guys want to see something really cool, check out Cosby Daff's DeviantArt page. This dude draws monsters that are truly awesome. I love this guy's art. The art alone is worth the cost of admission to this story, which is free, but like the time you'll spend reading it is worth it, justified purely by how awesome it looks.
I gotta say, I want to say he actually was part of Bogleach once upon a time, because I distinctly remember seeing some of his monster designs in their like little commentaries and discussions on kaiju that they would have.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to look that up. Now, we'll get into some more miscellaneous trivia later. So let's set the stage for the story to come. This young guy named Zach, he goes on a nostalgia binge, as one does, and decides to pick up some old retro games. And one of which he finds is the NES Godzilla King of the Monsters. And if you ever played it, it's okay. I'm not gonna say it's bad. It's not really great. It's a little grindy, but it's a very competent, platformer, side scroller, boss rush. It's okay. It's a pretty fun game.
I gotta say, it's very much of the time, because having I did not read it. I listened to the audio version done by Goji73, which is really good.
Nice.
I think that's probably the one that actually did the entire first bit. But like the fact that he mentions like he bought a bunch of NES games initially, and he's like, and I bought this really dumb one called Action 52, and I'm like,
yes.
You do realize that not only is that incredibly rare, it's also like
considered a collector's item now.
Yeah, so this is very much like of the time, because I distinctly remember like it started just about the time that the nerd mentioned Action 52 and like brought it back to the public consciousness. So yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of anachronistic.
So. I mean, like, yeah, there weren't that many cartridges of Action 52 to begin with. And I think, honestly, he did it kind of as a joke, because there are little bits of humor peppered in throughout, which I would say is one of the strengths of the writing.
Oh, I mean, yeah, like, very clearly some of the rebuilt monsters. Like, there's the one which is basically just a skeletal woolly mammoth, but it then it's like, watch out, baby, and then it pulls out a crotch Gatling gun. Yeah, don't tell me that wasn't entirely, tongue in cheek.
No, he knew what he was doing, and it was funny that he did it. So he gets this cartridge and he pops it in, and the game's not really quite like how he remembers it. Everything is just a little bit off, if you will. So Zach starts playing to the game, and he's just like, the levels are different, stuff is different, the boss fights are suddenly very different.
Well, first, what happens is, I want to say Hedora or Gazora glitches out and is replaced by another monster. And he starts noticing that not only are the monsters slowly being replaced, but like the levels are being replaced, and even later the worlds themselves are. It's no longer the planets of the solar system. It's now like states of distress. So yeah, he's like, we have gone officially off the reservation. We are now in crazy land. Population me and whatever is in this cartridge. But what I can appreciate, though, is that it's established very early on that whatever malevolence is in the cartridge is not supernatural. Oh, I mean, it is kind of supernatural in the sense that, like, it is not something that he understands. But it's not like, and then the voodoo cartridge tried to kill me. It's like, no. What Red can do is entirely within the understanding of being able to elicit emotions and show things. That's it. He's not going to be able to, like, reach out of the cartridge and, like, kill people.
Well, we're jumping a tiny bit ahead, because then one of the things that happens is he encounters a boss fight that's not in the game. He fights Titanosaurus. And he's like, oh, dude, like, I love the Godzilla film, so I know all these references. This is really cool. And then suddenly he doesn't go to the next level of the main game. He goes to Pathos. I called it up just so I have a guide to go with here. And then it's like everything just keeps getting weirder and weirder, especially because in Pathos, the map boss is Biollante. But the game came out the year before that film actually launched.
There's a bunch of references to Heisei Godzilla, which honestly would not have gelled with the fact that I want to say the NES game actually started before the major push for the Heisei timeline. If I remember.
The game dropped in 1988, so that's kind of your timetable.
Yeah, that would have been right after Godzilla vs. Destroya, I want to say, wouldn't it?
Destroya? I thought that was in the 90s.
And what? If I recall correctly, doesn't he have an entire like initial thought process of, oh, maybe this was like originally planned content as like a movie tie-in?
He sees Biollante and he's like, it's only a year difference. This could technically be explained, even if it's kind of a stretch. And then he's kind of like, well, maybe this is a modified cart. Like someone put a hacked ROM into the cart instead. But when he beats Biollante, he encounters something that he's never seen before, a monster that we will soon come to know as Red. And Red is one of the coolest monster designs I've ever seen. It has this tiki mask face, these creepy, like, weird extended T-Rex arms, spider legs, and this long whip tail.
Mm-hmm.
It is just freaking cool.
Okay, as an aside, I will stand corrected. Professor, you were correct.
Thank you.
Destroya was 1995. So you're right. I'm sorry, I thought he was in the 80s.
Nope, he was in the 90s. And in fact, that actually becomes relevant in the next level, because he doesn't fight Red. He has to run from Red. He wasn't supposed to fight him. The game literally instructs him to run instead. Which is a very un-Godzilla thing to do. That's more of a Gamera strategy, but, I mean, I digress. So, the next level has Orga. And Orga comes from Godzilla 2000. So there was definitely not a movie tie-in kind of deal.
Orga is one that Noodle and I actually really have a lot of history with, because Godzilla 2000 was one of our first Godzilla films.
Nice.
And the bit that they mentioned, that they mentioned that stood out to us was actually brought up in the thing, because he's like, yeah, Orga tries to swallow him whole, but you can use the heat beam and it basically like blows off a good chunk of his health bar. And I'm
Yes.
like, I remember that point because I distinctly remember both Noodle and I, Little D Taco, Little Noodle, were like howling with laughter because he's like, oh, I think there's candy in there. And he just like runs into the thing's mouth.
That's amazing.
It was very funny to us. So
It's so hilarious because I had to explain Orga to some friends of mine just a few days ago because there's a theater near me that's doing a Godzilla double feature this coming weekend. It's hilarious.
Oh, nice.
oh wow. Nice.
Yeah, Godzilla 2000 is a fun film. I mean, my personal favorite is Final Wars, but that's because that movie is so freaking insane.
Are you just saying that because it literally has Roland Emmerich's Godzilla get blown up in Australia?
There's something to be said for that, but the movie itself is just so kinetic. And weird story aside here is I first saw the film right around the time my sister Snek adopted her dog. And the dog was terrified because she was a rescue, so she was scared of everything. And she didn't want to be near people, but she didn't want to be separated from people. So, in order to see if ignoring her would work, I went and put on the movie because I found it for free on, I think it was back when Hulu was free. And I was like, oh man, I haven't seen this one. So I start watching it. I make me a pepperoni pizza, and this little dog just sneaks around the corner and army crawls her way over to me. And after feeding her a pepperoni or two, the dog is upside down in my lap enjoying the movie with me. So yeah, there's a bit of nostalgia tied to that.
Is this Lady Lacey?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Aw, pupper story.
Yes, she was a long-haired Chihuahua. She's very cute.
Yes, and let me tell you, you know how I am the Doolittle of the family, their
Right.
Noodle? It took me
Yeah.
a year for her to come and sit in my lap. So
Wow.
She's a bit unhinged.
even then, everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, she like you like have the touch." I'm like, "Of course I have the touch.
Who do you think I am? So,
I'm D-Taco."
so getting back to the haunted Godzilla, the next character introduced to is Face, the sociopath, who is just like a little emoji who asks Zack yes and no questions and just makes faces about it. Like, some of the examples he gives are, do you like dogs?
Do you like it when you bite a woman?
Have you ever killed anyone? Do you like hurting people? Does your dog like the president? Is the sun hot? There was no rhyme or reason to it. Honestly, I think Face was mostly there to just kind of troll the player.
It was there to muddy the waters for people to think that there was some kind of like greater malevolence going on
Yeah.
and just like keep them asking questions.
Yeah, okay, so he actually lists the first quiz. Do you like the game? Are you afraid? Are you over 18? Do birds have teeth? Stuff like that. It goes all over the place. So
Now, I admit it's been a hot minute. I only just reread the first chapter. It could have been that in the remake, because the remake actually goes a lot more into like the overall mechanics of the game,
yes.
whereas Zack kind of gets lost in the weeds of the trivia of like, oh, here's Magiba, the walrus kaiju, and here's Gazora, and here's, Atragon, and, Mogira. But he doesn't really think about, okay, why is it asking me these bizarre questions? He just is like, well, that's weird.
Yeah,
Moving on.
Zack kind of takes it in stride, and he's like fanboying a little too hard for him to like kind of see the writing on the wall that things are not right. So things hit boiling point when he runs into another Red encounter. And again, he has to run away. And this time, he decides to taunt him. Zack decides to taunt Red once he gets away. And then Red turns to face the player. And Zach is just like, oh no, so something has definitely gone awry. And as an aside, one of the things that I think is actually really good about this game that a lot of gaming creepypasta could take a lot away from is that for the vast majority of the time, like Itaku said, the antagonist isn't doing anything outside of the expected parameters of a game. Like, sure, the fact that it seems like Red heard him when he was, taunting and cursing at him, but beyond that, everything is well within boundaries. Nothing is really out of place, apart from the graphics being like a little too good for the NES. But I mean, details.
That is actually a thing he brings up is like because he starts going to water and ice levels that have transparent layers.
Like
And
the
he
NES
distinctly,
literally cannot do that.
yeah, it's like I don't think the NES is physically capable of doing this, but it's really well done. I think it looks good.
And yeah, the whole thing is he talks about his experiences like a gamer would talk about his experiences in the game. And the thing he doesn't do is just devolve into a stuttering mess the instant the game starts messing with him. There's pacing. There is an elegance to the build-up and escalation of threat. And I think that is just omni-important for stories like this to actually work. The reason things like Sonic.exe don't work is because most of the time you're waiting for something to happen and the payoff sucks. And like what's going to happen before it happens. In this, you're left guessing. You have stuff like Face's quiz. You have stuff like there's a bit in the second quiz. He asks, "Oh, do you want a new monster?" And when he says yes, he gets angurous. And so he's like, "Oh."
Or there's the constant strangeness of the television. There are certain stages which are literally just him watching short GIFs
Yeah.
and animations. And there's no real, even at the end, there's no real like explanation for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're just kind of left wondering what the point of it is, especially as they keep getting increasingly gory and bizarre as this game goes on.
And he notices like some of the text glitches here and there, and things are ever so slightly out of order. And then like the next boss he encounters at this point is a monster that claimed to be Gazora, but it's this weird humanoid alien with like a vent for a face. And then he goes underwater, and he even mentions like, oh yeah, like it's a transparent layer. That's not a thing the NES was capable of. And he goes on. Yeah, there's a good cross section. If you're a Godzilla fan, there's a good cross section of kaiju in this. Like he even has freaking Maguma the walrus. Like I barely know who Maguma the walrus kaiju is. Like, come on.
Yes, and the professor is really well versed in tokusatsu. So.
I do love me some kaiju films. There's no doubt about that. And again, the art is so good. I have to say this because I just got to not Gigan, who's this weird like bloodied frog slasher monster. Just good design is good.
You know what my favorite one was?
What's that?
The Moon Beast.
Oh yeah, no, that's fantastic.
That one was really good, especially the way that he described the intro, where it literally has the alien moon that was controlling all the because basically in that stage he mentions that like everything seems like an alien world, but in later levels things will just start. The animals and plants don't act the way that you think they are, and suddenly there's this weird moon that shows up, and he's like, there's some kind of connection, I'm sure. At which point he goes to the end, the moon literally drops, cracks open like an egg, and this horrifying like whale beast thing pops out and starts attacking him. That's my favorite of the new ones. Although the Chimera is a close second, but that seems kind of cheating to me, considering it's literally a gestalt of all the other like replacement monsters.
Yeah, but it is still really good. The Chimera design is still solid, even if one could argue it's lazy. I actually thought it was very cleverly executed.
Well, I think it's a cool idea, especially considering that he mentions that it had like 7 health bars, but you would have to hit very specific points of the monster in order to do damage to each health bar.
Yeah.
And you would have to break all the health bars in order to actually hit the head and kill it.
Right. Now,
So
another thing that's really interesting is one of the things that he encounters is the monsters seem to be interacting with each other. It's not like a traditional game where you fight the bad guys and the bad guys fight you. Stuff is happening in this broader world. Like, the game is more active, alive than you'd expect. Where, like, there's these weird trypophobia aliens that show up, and these giant condor things start diving down and, like, grabbing them in their claws and just leaving. Like, they don't even care that the player is there. They are just doing what they would have been doing naturally.
mm-hmm.
And
or there's the big heads, which are like running into these giant like human face toad monsters that just like devour them whole.
Yeah.
And they're like seemingly like joyous at the fact that they're gonna die. It's like that's Zach like comments is like that's really, really grotesque.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
And so when you around this point in the story is where a lot of people will end up arguing whether the story was a make or break kind of situation. Not because of Fish Red. Fish Red makes me laugh, but because a very important personal detail of Zack's is revealed to the reader. It is revealed that he was dating this girl who was very much in love with her, named Melissa, and the game name drops her to him. And basically also mentions how she dies, which I can't actually talk about because Big Brother YouTube will demonetize me for even saying the word. And so now that you know exactly what I'm talking about...
She went to Brazil in Pal World.
She went to Brazil, yes. And he never saw her again. And so the game, like, Red shows up and basically starts taunting him with this information. And Zack is like, this is getting a little real for me. And
oh man, I don't like the fact that you know that my girlfriend went to Brazil. That's I'm sensitive about that.
So
telling her she should have gone to Argentina instead.
Ooh.
Oof.
Dark.
So basically, he's like, okay, this game knows more about me than it has any right to, and it's getting all a little personal. But he's like, okay, like, you guys are curious, and I'm curious too. I want to know what the deal is. Like, why is the game suddenly bringing up my personal life? I have to find out. So he soldiers on, and Face decides to be a jerk to him. And one of the questions he asks is, do you like Mothra? Now, if you haven't played the game, Mothra is objectively the weaker of the two characters the game gives you. Godzilla is up and away the best character. He hits harder, his beam weapon works better, and Mothra just kind of sucks in general. She's not very good. And so when he says no, Face just goes, too bad, and makes him play the entire next world with nothing but Mothra.
To be fair, they mention that Mothra gets basically buffed for this.
Yeah.
Because Mothra in her regular state is borderline unplayable.
She's playable, it's aggressively unfun by comparison. Now, part of it is also the world that he goes through with just Mothra. Not only does she get a buff, a lot of the level design is such that no other monster could surmount it because you have to be able to fly. So, like, a lot of the levels are like mazes and such.
Well, if you had other flying monsters, like, say, you had my boy Ghidorah be playable, but no, we gotta...
They're not going to make Ghidorah on the good guys team. They're just not going to do that. They could have had Rodan, who is literally known as the flying monster, but what do I know?
Yeah, Rodan, okay, I'm going to say it, as much as people like to have them team up, they only teamed up in, like, one movie.
They've teamed up in a couple films, to be fair.
That was like, when people are like, oh yeah, remember the part when Goku and Vegeta teamed up together? It's like, that was literally one fight, guys. That was against Kid Buu. And yet everyone seems to think is like, that's the way that Dragon Ball was. It's like, it wasn't. It wasn't, guys.
No, Vegeta would job, and then Goku would win. That's how it worked.
Why do you keep saying things that are so true and yet so controversial?
I mean, it's my job, really. And Vegeta's job is to lose. So he gets to a aerial-themed level, and Red just decides to sprout wings, because growing a fishtail wasn't weird enough. Red is a very versatile kaiju. And he gets chased into the next level, basically. And then Face asks in the next world, "Will you miss me?" Which, certainly gives a certain sense of foreboding and finality. And along the way, they encounter a certain someone, a certain mimetic genius known as Solomon, who is a very strange gargoyle kind of looking kaiju. And every time he cleared a level, it would just say, "Still the best, 1973. And when asked what that meant, Cosby Duff said, "I just did it to be funny. It literally doesn't mean anything."
It's because Solomon's still the best.
He is.
1973.
he is. And no, he ends up joining the party as kind of like the in-between of Godzilla's brute strength and Mothra's mobility, and ends up kind of rounding off the team.
He's kind of the knife fighter, like close quarters brawler, because even though he is not nearly as tough as Godzilla is. His slash attacks do huge amounts of damage. Cosby Daff makes mention of that, like, very specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, he seems to have a lot of other restrictions, so like he specifically cannot go to certain stages. And I want to say Zach mentions that it's like perhaps because of his demonic nature that he can't do that.
Yeah.
So
because we don't know a whole lot about Solomon, but we do know that he is some kind of demonic origin, which, given that there's literally been a comic book about Godzilla escaping from hell, is not even that far off the mark at this point.
And considering that Red taunts him as a traitor when the two of them interact, there's clearly some kind of connection between them.
There absolutely is, yes. Right, because the map, I just got to that part where it's like the map icon is literally a cross. And it just says, "Solomon can't enter here." So he instead goes into Godzilla, which takes him to the mausoleum.
Yeah, I reread it, rewatched it yesterday, so this is still fresh in my memory.
Good. And a really nice touch that he adds is there was an 8-bit rendition of "Prayer for Peace," the ending theme from the first Godzilla film, which is just a nice touch. Toku fans like me appreciate that kind of thing. And so this is where the final confrontation comes to a head. Now, I complained about Ben Drowned becoming a shonen fighting anime, and honestly, this one kind of does it too. And I think some of it works and some of it does not. There's this weird blue angel figure, which has shown up in a couple levels up to this point, appears as a buffer between Zack's kaiju and Red. The angel gets torn apart in a rather loving homage to Saturn devouring his children. And then, he decides to taunt Red one more time, which gets him a very angry spider kaiju in response. Which I believe goes to this is the last level. They go to Zenith. Yes, they introduce another kaiju, which the game immediately removes from the playing field. And at this point, the game is just cheating. The game is not even being subtle. It's like, no, I hate you. I'm not going to let you even do that. So he has to kind of soldier through with the kaiju that he's assembled up to this point. Which, is Godzilla, Mothra, Anguirus, and Solomon. And, he basically has to put all of his skills to the test in these final couple levels, and the designs just get amazing, I have to say. There's these weird, corpse crawling things on the walls. Those are super cool. It's like statues of Red in the background. It's all just masterfully done.
There's this one monster that I really, really liked that, it's not like a major enemy, but it's one that kept recurring in Zenith. It was basically like this flesh penguin that would like waddle towards him really rapidly. And so the thing wasn't like particularly threatening by itself, but they would come in packs. And so it basically is like, I have to avoid them because killing one's not a problem, but killing like 30 of them and they come in packs of that number. So
Yeah, so like that's a little bit more complicated. Basically, after Zenith, we get to the final confrontation. And you got to understand that this entire time the art has been evolving. The pushing the NES graphical limitations is long since been surpassed, and we're looking at stuff that looks like it was done in Photoshop, albeit very, very good Photoshop. The world is like fleshy and distended and all distorted. It's really freaking cool. I love Cosby Daph's art so much.
Let it be said, also, Zachary never mentions that things are quote-unquote, whoa, hyper-realistic.
Yeah, he never uses that term, and thank God for it. Stop using that term. You don't know what it means. Also, like, the idea that it's realistic doesn't make things scarier. I find a lot of the time the opposite is true.
And actually, I mean, that is kind of the point, is that you notice that, like, the flesh textures and everything are much more true to life, and that does kind of make it unnerving, especially compared to the like cartooniness of the Godzilla sprite.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, I think that's just an icing on the cake compared to the sheer like just unnervingness of everything that was going up to this point.
But masterfully done. So we get to the final chapter. And again, this is the base-breaking part of the story. Zack finds he literally just can't move. He's physically paralyzed. He's basically, he's only really able to move his fingers and thumbs, and he's basically just trapped playing this game. It's basically just this last-minute slam-down brawl between Red and the kaiju that Zack has gotten up to this point. Red kind of goes through his different forms, like he uses the fish form, he uses the wings form. Zack even complains, he's like, if you're gonna cheat, like, why even let me play? And Red's like, well, I can't break the rules. Which I think is really important, and I want to get back to that momentarily. But there is something to that, I think. So, he starts losing monsters. Like, I think he loses Anguirus, like, pretty quickly, actually. He loses Mothra, and I think he loses Godzilla. So he sends in Solomon, which is when he says, oh, traitor, I've always hated you. And Solomon is, of course, supposed to be the BAMP, so he's like, I'd rather die than serve you.
He's so cool!
He is. Solomon is still the best. I will give him that.
He is basically the Shadow the Hedgehog. Like, oh my goodness, he's so cool and dark, but he's also a good guy.
No, that is 100% true. And he goes into his final Super Sigma form, where he basically turns into like a giant insect dinosaur. And the game basically is forced to throw him a bone. Oh, right, I almost forgot this bit. Red calls him by name. He calls him Zachary. And then Red goes crazy with this bit and starts saying he's responsible for Melissa moving to Brazil. That happens, and Zack is just like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't really have many other choices. So he sends in Godzilla and ends up game overing until the shonen battle moment kicks in. At this point, the Blue Angel shows up. This is where stuff's going to go crazy, so I ask everyone at home to bear with me as I'm explaining this. If you haven't read the story yet, you probably should. Should have led with that. It's too late now. We're into the thick of it. The Blue Angel calls herself Melissa, and that she's returned from Brazil, and that even after going to Brazil, Red is responsible for torturing her, and that if he can't stop Red, then it will just be the same with Zack, and Zack will be forced to move to Brazil too.
He's like, I don't speak Portuguese.
I was just about to make that joke.
This is why we're friends.
I'm sorry.
So,
yes,
he gets one last additional kaiju, the monster that was sealed away before, Acacius the Golden Lion. And on the one hand, I totally get why people feel that this is like kind of a cop-out and that Godzilla really should have been the one to finish Red. At the same time, I get what he's going for because this game is already so weird and broken so many acceptable rules for how the game is supposed to work. I get both arguments.
For what it's worth, for my opinion, as much as that counts for anything, I can see it both ways. It just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But at the same time, though, I have to concede that, like, in the broad scheme of things, the best kaiju tokusatsu is basically giant monster wrestling. And what's not the most professional wrestling thing to be like, oh no, the villain is winning. Oh no! But then the new cool guy comes in and with a steel chair and just wins
and saves
just
the day
effortlessly. Yeah, and so that's what happens.
Yeah, that is exactly what happens, and I get why some people were put off by this, but I'm going to address that in a moment because there's a second ending to the story. And because of some of the negativity that surrounded the initial ending, Cosby Daff wrote an alternate ending where it turned out Red was secretly John Madden, and that's why the cartridge was evil. he actually did that. That's a real thing.
I need to see this.
He writes a very short, no art included alternate ending where Red was secretly John Madden, and that's the entire punchline. That's where the initial story ends. And I get it. If you didn't like it because you felt it was a cop-out or because it was a little too strange, welcome to horror. I don't really know what to tell you. Second, I get it. I see the argument. I do. I love it. I think it was a fine story that stood up on its own. And you know what? Horror stories can end on happy endings, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now,
I'll say this. I think, for what it's worth, it has to be done well. I think that the entire ending of the John Carpenter's The Thing, where it's just Kurt Russell's character is stuck with the radio operator guy. And the two of them are the last survivors. And you're like, is the other guy? Well, we've seen Kurt Russell this whole time. We know he's not a imposter. But the radio operator guy has disappeared a couple times.
Yep.
And we've seen people just for a second who have been just gone, and then they suddenly are start sprouting tentacles and things.
Yep.
And I distinctly remember you, Professor, because we saw this together. You're like, Wait a second. The operator doesn't have any smoke, any
you can't see his breath, even though they're in the Arctic.
He's clearly an imposter, and I'm like, oh snap! But we don't know, and I'm glad that John Carpenter hasn't come back. Well, he died, but he never came back and was like, yeah, that's what happened. So I don't. It has to be done well, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you have an ending that's weird like that, it has to be done well. And I as much as I said, the way it was presented left a bad taste in my mouth, even if it is the most kaiju thing that probably could have been done, really. I don't know. That's just my opinion, though.
And that's true. And I think if the story remained at that, I think that would be a perfectly valid opinion to have. I think the sequel fixes and justifies every flaw of the original. The sequel is not finished, to be clear. So there's room for error.
It's been going on for 12 years now.
Yeah.
So.
He's presumably has a day job and stuff, so it's not top priority. And again, the art is even better in the sequel, which tells me he's really putting his all into it. So at the end of the story, Zack is like, I could break the cartridge, I could destroy it, I could hide it in a closet where no one will ever find it,
or I could sell it on eBay.
And the whole thing is just I don't want to have it. I'm just going to give it away. I can't keep this in my possession, is his rationale, which I'm like, okay, you need a sequel hook, I get it, but dude, come on, hit it with a pickaxe or something. So our new friend...
Destroy it! Cast it into the fire!
No. So
I was there when the day that the strength of kaiju failed.
So Zach sells the cartridge to Carl. And a thing that Carl kind of notes right off the bat is he's like, okay, I'm not like a diehard kaiju fan. I've seen some of the films. I know who Godzilla, Mothra, and Rodan are, but like he's not as ingrained into kaiju culture the way that Zach was. And with that prefacing underway, when he pops the game in, it's completely different. It's nothing like what Zach experienced. In fact, the first level acts as some kind of prequel, but you're not even playing modern Godzilla. You're playing an unmutated Godzillasaurus in the prehistoric age. And it's completely different. And, Carl is just left like...
I was just going to say, for the record, I've only just reread I read up to chapter 4, and that was basically when Cosby Dad was like, you guys are all annoying, I'm just going to cancel this. But that was like a decade ago. So.
Yeah, and he has picked it back up since. So, like, the last update was just last year. So it is still ongoing, but again, don't expect particularly fast updates. But yeah, there's like a battle, like he goes up against the Triceratops, and he sees like a bomb fall in the background, and Godzilla emerges in like his full form. It's all very fun. And at this point, he actually even reaches out to Zach, and he's like, it's different now. And Zach is basically like, I don't know. If you're suggesting I did it, you're wrong, because I've never seen this before. And basically the game restructured itself. And he has to get into this... the first one was like Gelid, the ice world, where everything is slowly freezing over, and the creatures there are slowly dying out because it is just so cold all the time. And he even meets this strange little Alamau character who tells him the first man to walk on the moon was Ezekiel Zanderfruit. And he's just kind of like, okay, no, but okay. He goes up against Kamaboas, who's some kind of turtle kaiju. I don't know if that's an actual kaiju or not. My knowledge is not that esoteric.
You don't know every kaiju ever?
I don't, sadly.
For shame, we're going to have to take your master in monster studies.
Curses. And then he meets this little green, kind of bird-looking fella named Usul. And Usul says, I am Usul, I don't know how I got here, please help me. And he just kind of was like, oh, I feel bad for him. So without even thinking about it, I just blurted out the word, sure. And the game responds, thank you.
Yeah, he just literally said out loud, sure, and the game responds.
Yep. The game is hearing what he's saying.
Which is increasingly the way that it was with Red and the other replacement monsters for Zachary.
Whereas very clearly hearing what he was saying. And then he goes to the final level of the world called Sin, where he fights up Lethar, a massive cyclopean monster with eye lasers, and get some kind of sigil engraved on some kind of door thing. And that's basically chapter 1. At this point, he tries passwords, and the first thing he does is try the names of the worlds from Zach's playthrough, and basically none of them work. None of them actually do anything. He ends up unlocking a sound test, which is very cute. He discovers a new language code. It's been a while since I've read the sequel, so bear with me as I'm scrolling through all of this. He finds a couple different random mini games, basically stuff kind of akin to the random TVs that Zach would find in his playthrough. So he tries Zanderfruit as a password, and it actually gets him somewhere, which leads him to a title screen marked The Transcendence Project with the note, do not redistribute this cartridge. So bad on you, Zach, because you redistributed the cartridge. So why'd you go and do that? Now you're in trouble from whoever the Transcendence Project is. And there's an authorization code, so he doesn't get any further than that. But immediately, the neurons start firing. Stuff is starting to take shape, is what I'm saying. So the next world he goes to is Corona. And Corona seems to have a strong lightning, electricity motif. Oh yes, one of the random residents is just absorbed with looking in a mirror and commenting on just how pretty they are. Random, but true facts. Whereupon he unlocks Rodan as a playable creature. So Rodan joins the party and he fights King Kong as a boss fight. And
yeah, as you do.
Before he was about halfway through the fight, and Kong just glitches out and disappears. And that's it. That's really all he gets to take away from that encounter. And he goes into a chess-themed level. He goes into like a forest-themed level with these big, terrifying pterodactyls with like vice grip mouths that are eating these weird deer creatures. And along the way, he encounters a very large, intimidating fellow who will later come to know as Warlock. And he's solid gray, and his nickname for a long time was Gray before he was like, no, we're not doing a color motif thing again, guys. Come on. Then he fights Exalton, a massive, flying, lightning-commanding demon monster. And he goes into Amorphous. Amorphous starts going into... he kind of starts getting more into the weird eccentricities of the cart. He encounters a monster, and it says, why can't I be strong? It's not fair. And he just asks, he just says out loud, like, how are you hearing me? And the monster responds, I hear with my ears. Beautiful. He runs into Usul again, who tells him a password, and he basically just gets the chance to jot it down, but he warns him, don't tell anyone that I gave you this, they might come after me. And then Usul just kind of bugs out. But trying that password gets him access to the journal of Dr. Robert L. Lawrence. It's just a journal dated in the 90s with separate text files in the cartridge. And that his response is basically what anyone would say. It's like, why? How? Why is this happening? Well, it turns out that this doctor was not the one who created the cartridge, but it was donated to him for study. And he basically is like, there's something anomalous in the game, and we're going to try to see how it works when different people play the game. He even tries having animals play the game, and the game basically shows no anomaly at all. It's just the original NES game, Godzilla. But each player is experiencing something completely new. It also starts having situations where these people are having their personal thoughts known by the game. It seems to be less of a case of possession, of being a haunted cartridge. It's really more like it's some kind of psychic anomaly. And this is the part that I was telling everyone to be patient for. Because this moment really is the moment that contextualizes the ending of the first part. The whole thing with Melissa, the whole thing with Red taunting Zack with knowledge that he couldn't have known, ties back into the fact that the cartridge is somehow reading the thoughts and experiences of the players and building a narrative around it. Because Ditaku and I were talking about this the other day, and we mentioned it's like the human experience is the narrative, and we seek out narratives in everything that we do.
Mm-hmm.
So, because of this...
It's a very human thing to seek out and create narratives out of just raw data.
It is. And that's exactly what was happening. What Zack had was not his, girlfriend who moved to Brazil haunting an NES cartridge. The cartridge was using memories and thoughts that he had to customize the game experience for him. Which, honestly, is way more interesting than stuff like every copy of Mario 64 is customized. Like, seriously, stop trying to make that a thing. It was a bad creepypasta to begin with.
Yeah, it literally is basically something straight out of Warhammer. It's like some kind of like psionic technology
Yeah.
rather than being, ooh, it's a ghost.
Yeah, so it's like, I think that this fixes a lot of the first story's ending, because of course he gets put into a weird shonen battle situation. That's what he expects from the genre. Exactly what Ditaku was saying.
Yeah, it is somebody who's ensconced in kaiju is going to think in terms of kaiju movie logic. So.
Yeah, exactly. So he's like, oh, well, obviously there's got to be a last minute shakeup where the status quo is changed. So hence, like, a hero arrives. So he gets a hero. He gets down to the wire, but manages to come out just on top, exactly the way a kaiju movie does. That is what happens to him, because that's what he expects to have happen. That's the
Unless
beauty
it's the
of
Jet
it.
Jaguar movie, which I recall Godzilla and Jet Jaguar like dogpile the enemies in that one.
There are certain ones where Godzilla basically just takes like a world tour and just stomps everyone. Yeah, there's something to be said for that. Now that I'm done gushing, Amorphous ends with the boss against Odia, who's a large lizard fish shape-shifting creature that he has to fight underwater. And of all the monsters, I'd say it's the one that looks the most like Red in the sequel, but he definitely has his own unique design, and I really, really like it. Next is Tempest, which we're getting very close to the end, so if you guys are getting tired of my recap, don't worry, it won't be too much longer. Tempest, he runs into Usul again, actually, and Usul says, I can't find my family, they're probably dead. And Carl asks, what is all this? Like, what is happening? And he gets called out by this weird gray ape creature that grabs Usul and disappears. And he's like, that's my friend. You can't do that. And so the game offers him up a new monster in the form of King Caesar, which is a relatively obscure choice, so nicely done. And he plays a bit with King Caesar, including a level where the trees have syringes growing on them and they make his monster high AF. That's a thing that actually happens. I swear I'm not making any of this up. And the next monster is a big old frog, a Suriname toad boss monster with little baby toads jumping out of its back. So that's if you people have trypophobia, maybe don't read this story, because there's a lot of that. Boss is a huge burb creature that commands the wind named Salach. And he has to fight it as Rodan, flying around and battling against it, and thus getting the 4th crest, before it turns out that King Caesar was actually screwing with them, and was actually Warlock in disguise. And Warlock even calls him out. He's like, you didn't learn anything from the journal that actually matters, so I can just end this right here. So he actually fights him to a standstill, and Warlock is forced to back off. That is actually where we actually learn his name, but I figured I'd establish it early so I didn't have to call him Gray the entire time. And the most recent chapter, March of last year, according to the WordPress page, he reaches out to Zach again, and they have a kind of a back and forth, and Zach is like, if I were you, I'd stop, which is funny for the guy who saw the game all the way through to completion. Carl kind of argues, he's like, I kind of feel attached to this, I feel like I'm seeing some window into an alien world, and I feel like I'm obligated to help the people of this world. And Zach is just kind of like, it's on you, I'm not going to tell you not to, but that is just how it be. So he goes to Alkali, and the entire format of the game changes. It's no longer a 2D platformer, beat-em-up monster brawler. It's actually a top-down view like Ikari Warriors. And he has to get money in order to purchase healing items, because the monsters don't just drop them here. The entire format is different. All the sprites are original. This really shows a level of dedication that Cosby Daff is willing to go to tell a good story. This level of effort is what gaming creepypastas need. So, stop lionizing Sonic.exe, for the love. Please stop. I hate that story so much. So he gets stopped by this really annoying alien, and the alien named Vaba charges him a total of money called Daru that he has to pay for each monster to cross over the walls. And he basically just has to stop and grind. And he's just like, are you kidding me right now? Like, is this real? So afterwards, he gets into town and he has to buy items to restore health and energy. And inexplicably, he is ordered to buy a plush doll every purchase that he makes. We don't really know why, but that is like what he is ordered to do. The only thing that seems to be a mechanical limitation is that the vendor does seem to have limited items on hand. So there's that. And he ends up kind of coming across the slums of this town as a level. And he meets this grandma and grandson, Elamau. And Carl starts having this conversation and actually is like just talking out loud. Again, the game is just answering him. And he talks like, oh, you know, what's going on? What's the deal with this town? And he's told of a creature called Avidus, one of the sin monsters. In case you haven't noticed, there's this very, very subtle Seven Deadly Sins theme going on throughout. If you missed that, I'm sorry. Get with the times. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. But the whole thing he learns is this entire area is basically a huge, very, very strongly stratified culture where the poor are kept in the slums and the walls separate where the rich live from where the poor live. And he's learning all these horrifying things, and all the enemies have like a mecha theme. Like he runs into Mechanicong, he sees Mecha Godzilla on the map. So there's this very strong mecha theme as he heads into the Silver Sector, which is where the story currently stands. So I'm just saying, this is incredible. I love what he's done with it, and I think the sequel is precisely the thing that addresses a lot of the soft spots found in the first story. I'm a fan. Can you tell?
No, I couldn't tell.
Just so good. And you know, if other gaming creepypastas put that much effort and love into their productions, I think maybe the term gaming creepypasta wouldn't largely be associated with complete crap.
I mean, I definitely agree with you on that front. Most gaming creepypastas that I've seen or heard of have just been like, well, most creepypastas that I've heard of in general are just like...
Oh, there are good ones. Just a lot of them are bad, and gaming creepypastas in particular are kind of notorious for, oh my god, I decided to get a Pokemon cartridge, but the sticker was gone, and they just wrote with a Sharpie, poke. Then I put it in my Game Boy, and it caught fire and summoned actual demons in my house. I think it was a glitch, so I continued playing.
I turned on the Pokemon Red cartridge, and it said Pokemon Blood Red. Oh, must be a bit of a glitch in the system, but I kept going.
And then the walls literally started leaking raspberry jam. That was hyper-realistic.
I looked into I looked and talked to Professor Oak, but his head was a skull. And he told me that I was actually dead.
Oh, man.
And he's like, in order to pass on to the true afterlife, you have to collect all 150 dead mod. Da da da.
Oh, no, I was so scared, you guys. I spooped my pants.
Whoa, that was pretty spoopy.
Ah, very spoopy, yes. Yet, still more entertaining than most gaming creepypastas, yes. But yes, the Haunted Godzilla cartridge pasta and its sequel are fantastic. Absolutely masterstrokes. I love the clear care and passion that Cosby Daff is pouring into this. I love what he's done with it. I love this world building, and just like, oh, like, duh, obviously, you know, his girlfriend who moved to Brazil wasn't really haunting the cartridge. It was actually this way bigger conspiracy, and I'm like, this is awesome. I love this. This is like if the SCP Foundation didn't turn into complete hot garbage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's definitely a point you can tell with SCP where it's like, this is good, this is good, this is good, and
It's garbage.
it's not. It's awful now.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been one who's been much of a fan of horror in general, but I do like the Godzilla creepypasta. And now I'm going to have to go and read the sequel.
No, it's good. I think you will enjoy it. You'll be waiting a bit for the chapters, though.
It's a lot more analytical. Carl approaches it in much more of a scientific way than Zachary, where it's very clear that, part of the reason why Zachary was attacked so enthusiastically was because he's kind of a nervous wreck.
Yep.
And, so this...
One probably would be a nervous wreck after a loved one moves to Brazil unexpectedly.
That's true.
Well, yeah, so the psionic mirror going, you have guilt over the fact that your girlfriend moved to Brazil and there's nothing you can do about it. And you're like, it's true. And I was trying to learn Portuguese through Duolingo, but do you know how long that takes? I'm not, made of time.
And that owl, man, he gets really passive-aggressive all of the time.
That's a creepypasta unto itself right there. There you go, aspiring authors. We have given you a prompt.
The Duolingo owl is trying to kill me.
Right, go to the comment section right now and write a short creepypasta about the Duolingo owl. That's your assignment.
Failure to do so.
I'd be surprised if that actually exists already.
Oh, I'd be surprised if it didn't.
Failure to do so, and Ditaku will come to your house and will rearrange all your spices, and then also noogie you during the night.
Surprise! No one suspects.
I'm not gonna physically assault people, but I'm gonna be very annoying to them.
That's fair. That does seem the Pugum way.
Joke's on you! I replaced all of the salt in your salt shaker with sugar.
Joke's on you! I replaced all this sugar in your thing with baking soda.
Oh man! I replaced your baking soda with talcum powder.
Oh jeez.
No, worse yet, baby powder, so that it smells weird too.
At least the things we were doing were at least still edible.
Nah, technically you can get a mouthful of talc and you'll be fine. You won't enjoy the process, but...
Okay, now I have to look this up now.
Is talc edible?
According to Google, talc is technically considered safe to eat when used as a food additive. So, yes, according to the USDA, it is. It's generally recognized as safe. So according to the government, as for what it's worth around here.
Yeah, but are we going to trust the feds?
That's a fair question. That is a fair question. All right, gents. So, were there any last comments or questions?
Okay. Wizards of Houston win. Snek ARG win.
Okay, let me just simplify things for you, Ditaku. The answer to all of your questions is it's done when it's done.
That's not a good answer.
Nope.
Topology!
Anyway, this has been the Hipster Snek, joined today by the brothers Pugum, Noodle, and Itaku. Thank you, gentlemen, for accompanying me on this deep dive into one of gaming's finest creepypastas.
You will see me again in, Ditaku 2 Tortoise Strikes Back.
And I'm still the best. Since 1973.
Well, of course.
Or 1991. One of those years.
One or the other.
One of those.
Anyway, we will see you guys next time.